Only 2 years removed from winning a title, and the Milwaukee Bucks have now been bounced in the first round and are at risk of losing two of their starters in this offseason, with Khris Middleton and Brook Lopez having the opportunity to leave in free agency. Even though they still have Giannis, and with that, one of the best players in the league, the Bucks enter a situation this offseason where they could lose some core pieces of their group that has won them a title and could end up being in a situation that even with Giannis, they might be far from the favorite as they enter next season. We're going to get your thoughts first, Garrett. What do you foresee from this Bucks team as we head into the offseason?
So when we look at the Bucks, obviously won the championship in 2021. There's a lot of people that are kind of on either side of the fence with that, like if they were too lucky, if they deserved it. And then like going into last season, like there were a lot of people though that were picking them to repeat, and I was even one of them. And then they eliminated my Bulls in the first round, but also against my Bulls, Khris Middleton goes down, and Giannis had played great. Holiday played great defense, but they couldn't get it done against the Boston Celtics. And then like you come in this year, and I think everyone thought like, oh, Middleton's back. He didn't quite have the year though that people thought, and like he had a lot of games where he came off the bench, and he really missed a lot of games still, and he looked like kind of like a shell of himself. Like it was kind of like a replication of I think it was like 2017, like for him, where like he had a good year the year before, and then the next year he kind of like was injured. He had to get integrated into the team, never really found his footing, and then the next year he came back. The problem though is that this is like 5 years down the line. We don't know if he's actually going to come back the same way he did in 2017, 2018, like the year after. So it's like, and we think about like when they lost to the Heat, and people are going to talk about the injuries to Giannis, and that is fair, but at the same time he did also come back. So it just felt like to me, like watching this Bucks loss this year, it felt more painful, I guess, like for them than it did the year before. And like there's just some question marks with, first of all, at the center position, like we got Brook Lopez, who's a free agent, and especially right now, like they gotta play defense in free agency, because he's probably one of, if not the best center in free agency right now. And they want to make sure they can bring him back. They already are the oldest team in the NBA. So even if they lose him, they're still going to be one of the oldest teams in the NBA. I feel like you just got to commit at this point. We already know like what Drew Holiday said on, he said about how after his contract, he's seriously contemplating retirement. So there's a good chance that he'll be done after at least like 2025 at the latest. So at least like right now, the window is small, especially for a young star in his prime in Giannis. And you also look at like Bobby Portis, who's, I guess, like he basically, after he got eliminated or they lost, he put out like a big thank you speech for the Bucks. It almost felt like he was done like with the team. He had played his last game with the team, and then he also like unfollowed teammates, most notably Giannis. So it's like it feels a little bit weird with that as well. And like those are your two bigs. Lopez was the runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year, and Bobby Portis for most of the year was the runner-up for Sixth Man of the Year until like quickly had a late surge. So you think about that, like if you lose one or both of them, it's automatically going to be a huge hit. And then I'm just looking at the rest of these like players in the team. Jay Crowder's a free agent. They made a move to try and get him, but it almost felt like he never had a real role in this team. Like he even said himself, like, I don't know like what my place is here or something like that. But I'm also looking at guys like Grayson Allen and Wesley Matthews, who have been at the guard position for the last several years, mostly just to be, catch and shoot guys, defend a little bit. But I just don't know how I feel about them on the floor. And I know Grayson Allen is still young, Wesley Matthews not so much. So maybe there's that, but I just don't know how I feel about them moving forward. I do think Joe Ingles is someone that they should bring back, just because like I like this veteran leadership, and I think he was huge for them in crunch time lineups. I think he's someone that can handle the ball, especially in like a pick and roll game. He's always been really good at that, especially at the forward position. He's a 3-point shooter. He's a savvy defender, not really an athletic one, but he's a savvy defender. Also like I thought Javon Carter had spurts this year where he looked really good. And other than that, like there's just not a whole lot of wiggle room for this team unless they make a splashy move. And right now, like probably the most notable thing outside of like the known unrestricted free agents in Lopez, and Crowder and Ingles is just Middleton's player option, which is for $40 million. And based on the year he had, he's definitely going to accept that. And so now it puts you in a weird position where it's like you think Holiday might retire soon. Brook Lopez, while you do want to bring him back, he had a good year. He's 35 years old. Jrue Holiday might retire at the end of this contract. So it gives you maybe like 2 more years roughly with this as the core, or else one of two things happens. Either A, basically it's going to be a whole roster overhaul that they're going to put around Giannis, or B, Giannis is going to decide, you know what, I want to go somewhere else. And I personally don't think Giannis is the guy to do that. I feel like he's always been the guy where, you know what, I want to stay loyal. I want to stay true to the team that, picked me originally, and like the team that's believed in me for the last 10 years now, especially when he didn't really have, he had like his story is kind of insane. I don't know how much you guys like know the whole depth of like when he was drafted, but like the fact that they gave him an opportunity, I think he's extremely grateful for the city of Milwaukee. So just for that fact alone, like I think he's going to want to stay as much as he can, but you also don't want to put him in a position where it's like, it's just not a feasible place to play. They already, like I said, are the oldest team in the league. So I think they got to find a way to put more shooters around him. Khris Middleton, if he can, you want to see how he plays this year. I think by the trade deadline, though, you definitely want to make a firm judgment as to whether, this is going to be something they can continue to build on long term. Because in the playoffs a couple of years ago, when they did win the title, I thought he played pretty good. Maybe even some could say better than his expectations. If they had a conference finals MVP the year before, he would have got it because he was so big against Atlanta. So that's just how big he was. And I think they're going to need that or something similar to that from him again. From Jrue Holiday, they're going to need better offensive production. As great as his defense is, and I kind of said this about Lou Dort, but obviously Holiday is a much better player in all levels. Like, Holiday is a premier defender in this league, one of, if not the best perimeter defender. But at the same time, come playoff time, it just never feels like his offensive production is quite there. And then you have to ask yourself, is his offensive drop worth what he's giving you on the defensive end? And especially in this playoffs, the way, Jimmy Butler just played great against them in the first round, that it didn't even look like his defense had much of an impact at all. So, like, that's definitely something to consider moving forward. But, one tough loss this year, like, I think you still got to run it back with most of the core guys. We'll see who comes back. My biggest concern is probably Bobby Portis. I know he's on contract, but we don't know if there's something behind the scenes going on that might be explained later down the line. But I think you got to at least run it back one more time. And then probably in 2024, you're going to have to make some serious decisions, because by 2025, this could be a whole different team around Giannis, and he could have a whole different perspective of this team as well.
Yeah. In all reality, I think you covered a lot of the main stuff for them. They have a decision to make, but the decision is almost already made for them, if that makes any sense. Like Khris Middleton picking up that option, $40 million. You're not making anywhere near that on the open market, so you're picking up that option. You got to retain Brook Lopez, because if you don't, it's obviously a massive hit. Some of the other pieces, as you talked about, you can go back and forth on which ones need to be resigned and which ones don't. But at the end of the day, end all be all, you do not want to put Giannis in a position as a franchise where he has to make a decision on whether or not he wants to stay with you. That you just cannot do that. Arguably, for a period of time, he was the best player in the NBA. And already, as of right now, I would say he is the second best player in the league. You just, especially as a small market team like Milwaukee, you do not let that player go. You pull all strings. You have to keep him in Milwaukee no matter what. Even if it's, as we said, I personally think that he's a guy that will stay loyal, but you cannot even have the option on the table.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think the Bucks at this point, not that he already isn't, but I think with all the decisions you make, it's almost on the front office to consult with Giannis, because we've seen it with like a ton of superstar players. I know like Devin Booker was one that has had it for a while. Like LeBron has it everywhere he goes. When you have a guy on your team that's a best player in the world contender, you make sure that guy is happy and satisfied. And so, however much money that means they have to spend or whoever they have to keep and bring back, I think they're going to have to go out and do that. When you're a small market team and you have something built like this, you really do have to uphold that for as long as possible. When it comes to who stays and who goes on this team, I think they do everything to keep Khris Middleton because that's been Giannis's running buddy for pretty much his whole prime. Brook Lopez is really just based on the decision he makes and what they can afford to pay him. Because, I mean, if he just gets, like, offered a contract that other teams, like, can pay him way more, I mean, who says he doesn't leave? He is unrestricted at the end of the day. The other thing is, even if Jrue Holiday decides to retire after this contract, whether he decides to retire or not, he probably needs to be out this team sooner or later. It's just been shown to me in the playoffs that the negative impact of his offense is almost not worth how good his defense can be. And this year, his defense wasn't even really that great. So at that point, he wasn't really great on either side of the ball, and he's only going to get older. So at that point, especially for how much money he'd probably still command, and a lot of teams would still pay him at this point, I think you're way better investing that money into just more depth because with the players this team is losing, while this might be like a gap year because he is still on contract for next year and he's not exactly off your hands yet, you still are in a position where they're going to have to replace him sooner or later, and I think they will be better the sooner they can get off of him. You're muted, Trent.
You're muted. Yeah.
So yeah, the Bucks, I think they'll be fine for at least this season. I think they'll easily be still a top 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. I still think they'll be in the Eastern Conference Finals. Mainly, their thing will probably be the future of this team and what's kind of next, but it will all depend on Brook Lopez. I really think losing Brook Lopez is going to be the domino fall because he's their big part of their defense. And so, when you have Giannis and Brook Lopez out there, Jrue Holiday, that's a good defending team. And losing him, it's gonna be really, really tough. And I don't really know how you replace him because he also brings on the offense and not only on the defense end, but definitely stretches out the floor and makes it easier for Giannis to keep attacking the rim and getting easy calls, easy buckets, and it just helps him out a lot more because he can go out on the 3-point line. Now, if they get a different type of big that's not known as a shooter, that can affect Giannis's play style a lot. I think he'd still be a great player. He's the second best player in the league, but we all seen it. Giannis is not known as a good shooter in this league. So he needs to continue to attack, go to the rim, and pass out to the shooters. And that's what they built around him. So Brook Lopez will be a huge, huge loss to this Milwaukee Bucks team. Also, I do want to say is this postseason, it didn't go right for them. You blame it on the Bucks, but I also want to blame it on coaching. Sorry for the dude's loss, but he did a terrible coaching job. Budenholzer, that was a terrible coaching. Just terrible. Jimmy Butler literally beat y'all 1-on-5, and you did no defense adjustments, no coaching adjustments. It just didn't make no sense to me at all. You have a primetime defender and Giannis. You have Jrue Holiday out there. Understand his defense is, it fell down a little bit, but you can still find a way to play just a better overall basketball, even without Giannis. Because I personally believe the Bucks are still a good team without him. I don't think they win a championship because I think he's their superstar guy, but this team is still very talented. Players just didn't really live up to the hype this year. Khris Middleton was in and out the lineups. That's going to happen. His injury just wasn't 100. He was 100% later on, I guess, but just wasn't the same Khris Middleton that we all know. Jrue Holiday continues to keep falling apart. I do want to call out the Bucks front office for this. You traded Jay Crowder, I believe, for like 5 second-round picks. I could be mistaken, but it was a lot of draft capital. That meant that's kind of built up to maybe a first in a sense. You gave up that much capital for Jay Crowder. I honestly thought that would be a huge pickup for that team. When I seen them, that's going to kind of, put them over the Boston Celtics, put them over, win the Eastern Conference, and then you go out there and hardly play them. But also I'm going to look at the other side in the sense, maybe Jay Crowder's the problem, right? Jay Crowder, in a sense, was in Phoenix. He played good basketball, but then he kind of sat out for a while. He finally eventually got traded and then goes to another team. Yeah, they didn't play him too much, but is there a reason why they're not playing him? Is there something that we're not seeing? I don't know what's going on with Jay Crowder. I know Jay Crowder could be a little bit hard-headed. Maybe he's just not a good – doesn't have a good personality. I don't know what it is with Jay Crowder. It will be interesting to see what team he goes to the season after this to see if it happens to him. But just bring back the players that you need. bring back some solid rotational pieces just to play with Giannis coming off the bench. They got a new head coach in Adrian Griffin, which Giannis wanted him over here. So hopefully that can work out. I'm pretty sure Devin knows him. He's coming from Toronto, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, he's coming from Toronto. If your superstar player wanted him, you're gonna listen to your superstar guy. So we'll see how the Bucks go, though. I still think they're a top team in the East. I still think they're a top team in the East without Brook Lopez, but they won't win a championship. But if Brook Lopez is there, they still have a time. They still have a chance to win it all. I just feel like sometimes you go through droughts. You won a championship. You know, he made a great point. You know, was it a unsuccessful year? Yes, we had high expectations for you, but that doesn't mean it was, you know, in his words, like it was bad. Whatever his quote, you know, you can win 9 years and then what those 6 years are unsuccessful. Like thinking about that, it's like he has a good point in a sense, but I just feel like there was just a lot of high expectations, so that's why they kind of came for the Bucks. But they're still in a good position. The Boston Celtics, I don't really know how I feel about them too much. I think they're still going to be a dogfight, but besides that, they're better than the Sixers. They're better than the Cavs. They're better than the Knicks. They're not better than the Heat, though.
Yeah, I think like the one thing for me, like when we're looking at this team, is that I know you mentioned like the center position, and that's even one of the biggest concerns, obviously, because Brook Lopez is a free agent and Bobby Portis, like we don't know like where him and the team align like right now, I guess, just because it's been like weird. But what I will say is like I think also like just the shooting guard position, you know, it's just something like they need to figure out, and it's kind of hard this offseason because I don't know who's gonna fit that role that they can afford. But like I said, like when I was talking about Wesley Matthews and like Grayson Allen, like Wesley Matthews for his career has been a pretty good 3-point shooter, but the last 5 years of his career, he shot below his average, and every year his 3-point percentage has gone down worse and worse and worse and worse. And this year he shot like 31% from three, which isn't great, especially if you're one of the wing players. I know they play him kind of like more as a 2-3 this year than I guess other years, but like the point is like, and then also like Grayson Allen, who's not really a bad catch and shoot player, but he's also starting and he's also usually closing games. Most notably like the ones in the playoffs. And then also like he's a pretty good 3-point shooter until the moment rises late in games. So I feel like maybe you would want to decide to maybe you can move Grayson Allen to the bench and try to find that guy that can be that catch and shoot 3-point shooter. And I think like they're even kicking themselves a little bit because I know it's, I guess, like poor taste and timing, like to mention it right now, just because of the way they lost the Bucks. And then also like the fact that this guy got injured this playoffs, and the last time he was with them, he got injured too. But he has finished off most of the last few seasons, and that's Malcolm Brogdon. And the fact that they chose Bledsoe over him, and they still could have found a way, you know, kind of to move off of like guys like George Hill and Ersan Ilyasova, and they had draft capital, that there still could have been a way to find a trade with New Orleans, who at the time, you know, they had just lost Anthony Davis. You know, they were kind of like in full rebuild mode. Like they had just come off like the first year, like getting Zion. So they were kind of in a whole new direction. So I think if they could have found a way with that, and if you had Malcolm Brogdon at the shooting guard position as the catch and shoot guy, we'd be talking about this team a whole lot different. But now the struggle is, how are you going to find that guy? Because there are people maybe that could be in that role. Like, I mean, just looking through free agency, like, well, first of all, they could use Jay Crowder as that guy. They could pick up Max Strus, but it's just a matter of like, are they going to, you know, commit to them? Like, are they going to pay them the money? Are they going to bring them in? And I just don't know if they're willing to do that. I don't expect them really to do that. I feel like what we're going to expect is we're going to see probably these two guys, at least Grayson Allen, back on the team next year, probably in a larger role than he should be. And maybe even Wesley Matthews as well. And I think that's one of the biggest concerns as well, because a guy like Giannis, who's so dominant inside, you need to surround him with consistent shooting and timely shooting. And that's why Pat Connaughton got paid after they won the championship, because he did that in the playoffs. So that's kind of the biggest thing. I think aside from the center position, that's like the most obvious one. But I think moving forward, like also like they need to find guys who are reliable catch and shoot options. And it's just where you're going to find that is my big question, you know?
So let me ask you a question just for free agency wise. I'm not sure if they'll be able to afford him, but like, how do you feel about a Josh Richardson to Milwaukee. Y'all think that would be a good pickup for this team, or too expensive? I know the Pelicans have the bird rights for him, I believe. I'm not sure though. I think they do.
I'll let
They
Gabe go
should,
first.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
I mean, like Josh Richardson, I think it'd be cool. Like, it's not necessarily a bad pickup. I don't know if it's my favorite. I don't know if he's exactly the tier of shooter that I would want with this core and with this team. Like, don't get me wrong, he does provide something of value, and I don't think he would command the highest price. But I don't know if skill set wise, he's the exact kind of guy I want. Because as a two-way guy, like, this is a team that's already a top like 4 or 5 defense in the NBA. And if Brook Lopez leaves, we have a completely different story on our hands because he was one of the main factors in their defense being so good. And so if he's out, yeah, they're going to need defenders wherever they can get them to try and salvage that defense. But if right now we're just talking about improving shooting and improving the offensive side of the ball and what's around, like Giannis is a guy who doesn't shoot. Even if Brook Lopez is out, Brook Lopez is a 5 that can space the floor. So if they bring in a more traditional center, then it's even more so important that you have guys that are the highest quality of shooters as possible. And so while, yeah, not a bad pickup, I think I would explore other options first.
Well,
I agree with that.
The reason why I asked is because if we're gonna try to fix the shooting guard position, this free agency is just so bad.
Yeah, that's what I was saying is a challenge.
Yeah.
Like, where are they going to get it?
So I was looking at Clarkson, but I just think he's going to be too expensive. Like, I don't think.
The Bucks only have vet minimums, so they're not going to be able to have many options.
So that's
like
why
maybe Damian Lee, but like I just don't know how I trust him either. Like he's almost in a similar role, like just like Grayson Allen, just like Wesley Matthews, where it's like I feel just as confident, or I guess lack of the confidence with him in that position as I do them. So it's like, it's like apples and oranges.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think Josh Richardson or any of these guys really at a veteran minimum are going to be that needle mover. And that's the main problem we have with Milwaukee, right? I mean, none of these guys that we're going to be able to get for the money we have is really going to put you over the edge. I think Milwaukee's a great team if you can retain Brook Lopez, Khris Middleton stays healthy, which that's a big ask at this point. Him getting older, having the injury problems, stuff like that. I mean, you're kind of stuck. I mean, that's how it is. I think the stuck they're in right now is good enough for them to compete for a championship like next year. But I don't think years after that we're even contemplating a championship just because of age, retirement, Drew Holiday, especially. There's those questions there that we've talked about pretty much the whole episode, and the veteran minimum is just not going to fix those problems.
Not unless they like bolster or change the team around Giannis. Like always with Giannis, you're going to be in that contention, but like there's going to be big changes made if they go in next year, similar kind of outing, or similar disappointing feeling with being eliminated, and then it puts you in a really tough position. So I think they're still fine for now. But come next year, and even at the trade deadline, we're going to be talking, I think, a lot more about Khris Middleton if he's playing anything close to what he did this season.
Yeah.
Despite all the decisions that the Bucks might have to make this offseason, and especially the concern that Brook Lopez might leave, they're still going to have Giannis heading into next season, and that in itself is going to make the Bucks one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. Whether Brook Lopez is back will factor into how much of a contender they can be, and hopefully they can add a few bench pieces to add a little bit of quality depth to their roster. But ultimately, they're hard-pressed to do so, and they really need Brook Lopez back so they can hopefully bounce back from their first-round exit this past postseason. But do let us know down in the comments below if you do believe Brook Lopez will be a Milwaukee Buck next season, and we'll see you guys in the next one.